time for the Praise Report, a media ministry of Heartland Christian Center. Many have been touched physically, spiritually, and emotionally while enjoying the program. And now, here's Pastor John.
Well, when I was a younger fellow, because I'm still young now, actually I'm middle-aged now, but it's okay. But when I was a very young lad, my father one day took me to the racetrack. I believe it was, I'm not sure if it was Roosevelt Raceway in New York, but I think it was Yonkers Raceway in New York. And he was illuminated. And he would talk about the drivers, Carmine Apatello and Willie Horton and Stanley Dancer and the horses, and he would say things like, when Stanley's behind a horse, it was like he was part of that horse, and the horse and the driver were one, and he was telling me all this, and I'm watching him. And Stanley Dancer at that time was the leading trainer and driver in the world, had horses, champion horses every place, and my father was so excited and so enthused that I said to myself, I'm going to make my father proud of me. I'm going to be a horse race driver. I got that in my head. I decided I was going to do it. And I had the mentality is that you could do anything you set your mind on. How many feel that way? Then my word of wisdom to you is, watch what you set your mind on. Are you there? But that was I'm going to be a horse race driver. So I started to try to get a job at the racetrack. I finally got to the racetrack, and I go to the stable gate. And the guards stopped me. They said, hey, kid, where you going? I said, I'm going in there. They said, you can't go in there. I said, why? They said, do you have a license? I said, what kind of license? They said, well, you have to be an owner, a groom, a trainer, a second trainer. You got to work here. Do you work here? I says, no, but I'm going to. They said, what do you mean you're going to? I said, well, because I'm going to be a horse race driver. This is true. I said, I'm going to be a horse. They said, really? They said, does your father have any money? I said, no. Do you have any money? No. Do you have any experience racing horses? No. Does anybody in your family have experience racing horses? I says, no. And they would laugh at me and say, well, what makes you think that somebody's going to give you a horse to race when they could give it to somebody like Stanley Dancer? I couldn't get in the track. I kept trying to get in racetracks, but I could never get in because I couldn't have a license. And I couldn't make them understand. Well, I'm going to go in there, I'll get a job, I'll get the license, I'll come back and show it to you. I said, it don't work that way. Well, I got very frustrated, and I found a program, a program, and I saw on there it said, this horse is going to race, and this is the driver, and these are the owners. So, for example, it might say, owned by Chance Encounter Stable of Fair Lawn, New Jersey. I said, okay, I'm going to go find that stable. And there was none. So every time it said Joe Blow Stable or something, it wasn't a real thing. It was a fictitious name, like Joe Blow Enterprises. It was just a fictitious name. So I kept asking questions, and then finally somebody told me about a tavern, I think a restaurant and a tavern. It was a bar and grill or something. And they said, well, the guy that owns that place owns racehorses. Why don't you go talk to him? So I go in there, and the kid says, how old are you, kid? Let me see your license. I said, I didn't come to drink. I came to ask you a question. I understand somebody told me you own racehorses, trotters and paces. He says, yeah? How can I help you? And I says, well, I'm going to be a horse race driver. And I said, and I want to go in and get a job working with horses so I can learn to be a horse race driver. He says, you got any money? No. Your father got any money? No. Anybody in your family work with racehorses? No. He said, well, kid, I own horses, but what I should give my horse to you to drive when I could give it to somebody like Stanley Dancer? I heard it so many times. I go home. We're sitting at the table. My mother's cooking dinner. My father's at the head of the table. I got my brother and sister doing something. And we didn't have cell phones. We didn't even have cordless phones. We had a phone on the kitchen wall with a cord. And I go and I pick up the phone and I dial this number. And somebody answers. And I said, I want to talk to Stanley Dancer. And my father goes like this, Tessie, he's trying to call Stanley Dancer. This is so true. My father's eyes got, what the heck's he doing? And I said to the person on the other end, I want to talk to Stanley Dancer. And I heard the guy say, hey, Stanley, some kid on the phone wants to talk to you. And Stanley Dancer gets on the phone. Here's a guy who's never there traveling racing. He actually gets on the phone. He said, how can I help you, kid? I said, Mr. Dancer, I want to be a horse race driver. And he says, well, why are you calling me? I says, because nobody will let me in the racetrack. Every time I go to the stable or to a farm or to the bar or to the guards, every time I tell them, they laugh at me. And they say this, why should I give you a horse to drive when I could get somebody like Stanley Dancer? I says, Mr. Dancer, I realize all the people that are telling me I can't do it, they ain't doing it themselves. But they're telling me why I can't. I said, so Mr. Dancer, I want to know, why can you be a horse race driver and I can't? And he gets phone, it gets real quiet. And he said, hey, kid, you got a car? I says, yeah. Let me tell you about this car. You step on the gas, the windshield stops. That tell you how old this car was. It was like a Model A, a Model T. And when it rained, it was vacuum. There was no power steering. There was no power brakes. It was stand up to stop. But I had one. And he says, okay, I want you to go to Liberty Bell Park. I got a trainer there named so-and-so. I'm going to tell him to expect you. He's going to give you a job. I was so excited. I got in my Model T. And I'm going down the New Jersey Turnpike to get on the Pennsylvania Turnpike. It is raining so bad. I step on the gas, the wipers stop. I had to keep going like this. Every time I step on the gas, every time I step on the gas, the wipers would stop. And then I get behind a truck, and a rock comes off the truck and breaks my windshield. I had to speed up. I waved the guy down. He said, what is it? I said, your rock came off your truck and broke my windshield. He denied it was from him. We had some words. And it's pouring rain. I'm soaking wet. I get to the racetrack. It's still pouring rain. And I step at the gate. The guard said to me, what do you want, kid? I says, I got an appointment with so-and-so. I said, Stanley Dancer sent me. All right, kid. He gets on the loudspeaker. And he says, there's a kid here at the stable gate for He said, Stanley sent him. And the phone rings. He says, Stanley told me about him. Told me to meet me in the cafeteria. I go to the cafeteria. He said, yeah, Stanley told me to expect him to give you a job. He said, you want to be a horse race driver? I said, yeah, I'm going to be a horse race driver. He says, you got any money? No. Your father got any money? No. You got any experience with horses? I said, I went horseback riding. He says, what makes you think that you could be a horse race driver? When people can give it to somebody like, I thought that was the end of this conversation. I didn't say anything else. I stood up. Where you going? Stanley told me to give you a job. I said, let me tell you something. I don't know nothing. And I know I don't know nothing. And I know that you ain't going to teach me. I went back in the car. So disappointed. My big break shot right down the drain. I get back from Pennsylvania Turnpike. I'm on the New Jersey Turnpike. And I see a sign. New Egypt, New Jersey. Of all names, Egypt. I said, that's where Stanley Dance's farm is. I turn down the road. I go down to the farm. And on one side of the road is Stanley Dance's horse farm. On the other side was his brother, Vernon Dancer. I pull into there, and there's the farm manager. And he says, how can I help you, kid? I tell him the story. And I said, Stanley gave me a job in Pennsylvania. I said, but I don't know nothing. And that guy wasn't going to teach me. I said, so before I gave up, I thought I'd come to the farm, see if you could give me a job here at the farm. He said, kid, if you're good enough for Stanley, you're good enough for me. He says, you know how to ride a tractor? I said, sure. My family's in the construction business. He said, go across the street there, and it's Vernon Dance's farm over there, Stanley's brother. Go in the barn, and you'll see a tractor. Bring it back here. Okay. This ain't a horse, but it's a start. It stopped raining by then. At least it wasn't there. I walk across the street. I go in. I crack up the tractor, and I'm coming back to where he told me to. And this big, long, stretched black limousine pulls in. The chauffeur gets out, opens the back door, and I'm standing in amazement. That's Stanley Dancer. So I get back to the farm manager, and he said, kid, I don't know who you are, but Stanley wants to see you in his office. I go to his office. All signs of success, trophies, blankets, flowers, all kinds, the thick rug, all kinds of the success you would expect for the number one trainer driver in the world. And he's sitting behind the desk and he said, hey, kid. He says to me, what are you doing here? I says, well, Mr. Dancer, I did what you told me. And I went and I saw that guy. He says, well, then what are you doing here? I says, Mr. Dancer, I don't know nothing. And it was obvious that guy ain't going to teach me nothing. So I came here, and the farm manager gave me a job. And he said, kid, do you want to be a farmer or do you want to be a driver? His exact words. I said, I want to be a driver. He said, you ain't going to learn it here on the farm. Going around the track with your little horse and you ain't going to learn it here. You got to be in the midst of the fire. When you get up in the wee hours of the morning and you're taking a horse that's bucking and kicking and bronking and your hands are freezing because they're so cold. He said, that's where we find out what you're made of. He picks up, I'm telling you, the red phone. And he says, Dick, he was the manager of Stanley's stable in Roosevelt Raceway. He says, I got a young kid here who wants to be a horse race driver. He said, I'm sending him to you. And listen to this. He said, I want you to teach him everything you taught me. Woo! Hallelujah! And that's how it happened. I went there, worked for a while. Then I became a second trainer for another stable. And then I got my own stable. And I loved it. I said, what a deal. And I did it for quite a few years, won a lot of races. And here's the moral of that story. If you believe you're supposed to do something or something you want to do, I've learned a lot since then. And then my journey with Christ here. But here's the moral of that story. You want to be successful in life, and you want to be successful in ministry, you want to be successful in business, get around people who believe in you, give you a chance, hello, and know what they're doing. Get away from all the losers and the boozers trying to tell you why you can't do what they couldn't do. It just might be their heart wasn't big enough, their vision wasn't big enough, or they didn't care enough. So follow your God-given dreams and get around people that are successful in what it is that you think you want to do. Say amen. So I want to pray for you. The name of this is Stanley. I'm giving him credit because he is the guy that gave me my first opportunity with racehorses, trotters, and pacers. If I could show a few pictures on my phone, the producers here is going to put a couple pictures in there from me racing horses. Don't look at the date. It was just, don't look at the date on the photographs. This one here, if I can read that in the back, this looks like it was in Liberty Bell Park in Pennsylvania, where I won that race. This is the one of the newspaper article. Okay. I think this is Freehold, New Jersey. And I raced in the Poconos, I raced in Yonkers, I raced in Green Mountain Park, Vermont, and Dover, Delaware, a lot of different places. But Lord, right now, in the name of Jesus, I pray for the viewers. And now, this is many years later, and learned a lot about walking in faith and victory and the Word of God. So make sure whatever it is that you decide you want to do is what God has for you, what God wants you to do. The reason I got into it, I wanted to make my father proud of me. And he sure was proud.